My name is Martha Robertson. I'm Tompkins County Legislator from the town of Dryden. And I want to introduce the planning committee that has put all this and tomorrow's program together. And I hope folks will just stand up where you are, and I hope you'll thank them all for a lot of hard work at the end of the list. Martha Armstrong, Karen Bear, Nels Bone. Stand up, come on, you guys, I know you're here. Whoever's here, as I call your name. Laura Branca, J.R. Claiborne, Joanne Cornish, Sue Cosentini, Janet Catraccia, Kirby Edmonds, Gary Ferguson, Bill Goodman, Rod Howe, Norma Jane, Marsha Lynch, Ed Marks, Paul Mazzarella, Megan McDonald, Kathy Schlaughter, Rob Studeville, Jennifer Tavares, Jeremy Thompson, and Irene Weiser. And this has been a huge team effort, and thanks to everybody. And a special thanks to Teresa Naylor and Bruce Stoff, who have been working their hearts out to handle 1,000 details I never even would have thought of. So thanks to Bruce and Teresa. All right, just a quick couple of questions. I hope that you, when you got a registration reminder yesterday, there was a Survey Monkey item. I hope you clicked on that link. We're trying to collect a little information about who's interested in the summit, what kind of groups, what kind of folks are represented here. And the Park Foundation, our biggest of the many sponsors, they're very interested in kind of what are the demographics of our audience. So, but for right now, I'm going to ask first, please raise your hand if you live in Tompkins County. Okay, then raise your hands if you don't. Do we have any of our many incommuters here? Okay, we have a very small number, a couple of incommuters. All right, that's good to know. How if you rent the place that you live? Please raise your hand. Okay, if you own. Okay, well then already we know that we're a little bit atypical, at least for the city of Ithaca, which has about 2/3 or 3/4 of the folks actually rent in the city. Well, I wanted to just take a moment and talk about, a couple of other housekeeping things. No drink or food in the auditorium. The planning committee members that I introduced before and the volunteers who gave you your programs, you could, if you have any questions, you can ask them. When we get to question and answer, we're going to have Christopher and Ed, and then we'll do Q&A at the end for both. We're going to ask so that we can get as many people as possible, try to be succinct. And again, thank you to all the sponsors who are on the back of your program. I wanted to take a moment and talk about our name, the name of this summit. Over the summer, the planning committee got together and wanted to create, we talked about our vision for housing in the county. And the idea of a place for all of us really was the guiding vision. It's a vision where young families just starting out and retired folks downsizing can find safe homes that they can afford here. It's a vision in which the hotel worker and hotel manager can both find a place that they can live. It means that whether you're a student or a teacher, whether you're a college professor or you're working on your GED as maybe a citizen returning home from incarceration, that you don't have to struggle to make a home in Tompkins County, a place for all of us. And what do we mean by housing by choice or by chance? Well, we wanted to highlight the fact that as one of the few places in upstate New York that's growing in jobs and in population, Tompkins County is changing. We are different than we were 10 years ago, and we're going to look different 10 years from now. So the question is, will we choose our future, or will we just let it happen to us by chance? Will those changes help us create the kind of community that we want? Will they further our values of equity, sustainability, and quality of life? I certainly hope so. This summit is just the start of the conversation about housing, a very important conversation for all of us. We've got a lot to learn and a lot to do. Together we can create a community that does work for all of us. So we're going to get started tonight. And we're going to get started with Christopher Coase from Smart Growth America. Christopher is Vice President for Real Estate Policy and External Affairs and Director of Smart Growth America's group called Locus, a national coalition of real estate developers and investors who advocate for sustainable, equitable, walkable developments. Christopher also advises the federal government and numerous cities on sustainable, equitable economic development. Christopher brings more than 10 years of experience in government relations, advocacy and coalition building, and program management. Under his leadership, Locus has tackled some of the toughest challenges facing cities today. In 2014, he launched the Attainable Housing and Social Equity Initiative, which has helped local communities encourage economic growth while ensuring accessibility and social equity in great walkable urban places. He's also advocated for a national 21st century transportation system. Christopher currently serves as an active member of the Urban Land Institute and as treasurer of the board of directors of African American Real Estate Professionals of DC. So it's my honor, my pleasure to bring you Christopher Coase.
How are you guys feeling? How are you guys feeling? Good. Thank you, Martha, for that wonderful and warm introduction. I have to tell this little story. The last time I was in Ithaca was during my sophomore year at St. John's University in New York City. For whatever reason, we thought it was a good idea to come to Ithaca in the middle of January for a residence hall conference. And I'll tell you, that was a very dangerous ride up. But interesting enough, once we got here, we took a fabulous tour of Cornell campus, and I have to admit, it was snowing really, really bad, and we were right on the grudge, and let me tell you, it was really scary. Really, really scary. But for whatever reason, college kids, we ended up at the bowling alley. And I have to tell you, I had some conversations with some folks. It's still there. So if anyone's willing, let's go to the bowling alley after this presentation and relive some of our college memories. But tonight, again, I'm really just grateful and honored to have the pleasure to come and talk to you about something I'm really passionate about how do we ensure that our communities are inclusive and vibrant in the 21st century. And I know I will be with you tomorrow and be a part of the summit's conversation. And so I don't want to give too much of my thunder, but tonight I really want to provide more of a national context of what's happening. One of the things I want to say to you is that you're not alone. Okay? This is not unique just to Ithaca or to Tompkins County or to upstate New York, but as someone who is from a small town in South Georgia, a small town called Thomasville, 20 minutes north of Tallahassee. If you ever had sunbeam bread, raise your hand. It's made in my town. But we have some of the same challenges. And I want to talk about those challenges and begin to provide a context for tomorrow's conversation about how we can address it. Okay? And I really want to then, as Martha had pointed out, my organization, Smart Growth America, is a national organization dedicated to researching and advocating for economically vibrant communities across the country. And so I really do have a cool job. And let me tell you, I know sometimes you hear this from folks who come from out of town. Hi, I'm from Washington. I'm here to help. Right? Well, that's not my role today. My role today is to just be a partner and tell you what I've heard and what I've seen and what I've worked on and help you come up with your best solutions, okay? And one of the things I will say is I see, as Martha pointed out, there are 6 exits. And in my role as Vice President at Smart Growth America, I manage a lot of our real estate programs. And one of the programs that I really am excited about is Locus. Anyone know what that means in Latin? Place, yes. So right now, those of you who are developers are probably realizing now that we no longer are building buildings. That's not our job. We're creating places. And so our organization works with a number of responsible real estate developers who believe that we need to create quality places for people to live, and that includes everyone. Now, I like to say that we are the good guys. I know that's hard to believe, right? Real estate developers who are the good guys. But there are a lot who understand this. So normally when I say this, I have to remind myself where all the X's are, so at the end of the speech I can know where to run. So please clear a lane for me if I say anything out of place. But with that being said, I want to take this moment now to really talk about the major market forces that brings us to the conversation we have today. One of the things I have to start off with is that when you talk about housing, if you talk about development, you have to talk about transportation. Transportation drives development. Okay? If you build highways and your roads, you're basically saying you want development that supports cars, right? If you take transportation that is multiple options, walking, biking, cars, buses, maybe now flying cars if Amazon and Google have their way. You have what is called multiple options, which creates walkable urbanism. So there are two forms that we shape the built environment that we live, work, and play in, whether it's drivable, suburban, or walkable urban. And this is important to understand this as we talk about some of the issues we're dealing with when it comes to affordable housing. For the last 60 years, America's primarily dominant pattern has been the drivable suburban model. And generally speaking, we all know the hit phrase, see the USA in your Chevrolet. That was a popular idea. That's what America wanted. And interesting enough, that was a very effective affordable housing strategy. If you were working in a factory and you could not live close to the factory, you just keep driving because gas was cheap, infrastructure was cheap, you found a good home, traffic was pretty good. Now, that worked for our industrial economy. And you saw over time, over the 60 years, we moved from the downtowns, we created our edge cities, and then eventually we got to our edge cities and to suburbia. Now, you may know where I'm going to go next. For much of the 20th century, this is where we lived our lives. We built the highway system, we then built the regional malls, and then we decided to build more infrastructure that has now led to what is infamously known as sprawl. This has been the dominant form of America for the last 60 years. And we're now seeing today what is the bill for that development, and has now come due. Now, interesting enough, starting in the mid-1990s, across the country, we begin to see some things changing, particularly in the demographic sector and economics. And I want to talk about that for a second. First, we started moving from the manufacturing economy to the knowledge-based economy, where we were shutting down our typical coal mines and smokestacks and chasing after talent. Most recently, Smart Growth America, working with Cushman & Wakefield, did a report called CORE, and it stands for Corporate Relocation Report. And essentially it surveyed over 500 companies that moved their headquarters or businesses from drivable suburban development, office parks, to downtown and walkable urban development. Can anyone guess what was the number one reason for most of the CEOs for moving their businesses to these walkable urban places? Just shout it out. Travel. Anyone else? Talent. Traditionally, if you wanted to attract businesses to the drivable suburban markets, you had to give tax incentives. Today, the number one incentive that a locality can give to a company to encourage them to move to their jurisdiction is abundance of talent and a healthy workforce. So with that, we begin to see in the 1990s and in today that the economy has changed. And to make a final point is that those companies, when they followed the workforce was not asking for drivable suburban lifestyle. They were actually asking for something different. Let me touch on that for a second. So who was the driver of this change in the 21st century? How many of you are millennials? Show of hands. Okay, a few of you here, you snuck in. Good, good. Supposedly, a new report came out like last week, and basically those of us who were born in like 81 and 83, we're not millennials anymore. Supposedly we're now late boomer Gen X's. No one knows what the heck about Gen X's, right? Like no one cares about them anymore, right? That's a little Gen X joke. But here's the thing you should know. When our grandparents were looking for, were growing up and reaching my age, or my little cousin's age rather, they actually were looking for that factory job. It didn't matter where it was, but that's where they were going to go. Today, 65% of individuals between the age of 25 and 35 pick a place first that matches their lifestyle before they even find a job. So if you have a really cool city, you live in San Francisco, you live in New York, or Knoxville, or here in Ithaca, I'm going to move there because I hear it's cool, it's hip, it has some of the edgy stuff that I like. And then once I get there, I'll figure something out. That's what you're dealing with. That's the dynamic that we have. Also, interesting enough, the National Realtors submitted a report earlier in July that basically said overwhelmingly millennials are favoring walkable urban communities. But one of the key things that we saw in the breakdown is that about 47%, nearly half, were favoring very large, mid to large scale cities. 12% of them really want a drivable suburban type lifestyle. But here's the interesting note. About 40% of millennials favored living in small college towns as a place that they would prefer to live. Why is that important? For a place like Tompkins that has major universities, you have a massive flux of individuals who want to stay here if they can afford it. So with that, you also have a situation where young Americans just don't want to drive anymore, right? How many of you, those millennials, have a car? All right, so most of you. Now, if you're a baby boomer, how many of you have a car? Oh, that's everybody else. Oh, you're going to love this presentation. Interesting enough, what we're finding is that there's this moment, and again, this idea that I don't want to drive. Because guess what? If I have a cell phone, you know one of the things I can't do in the car now? I can't use it. If I wanted to go to the bar and have a great night on Cornell's campus, you know what I can't do? So why would I want to drive if all my friends are on my Snapchat and all my friends are at the bar? So you create a situation where this population, millennials, want an option besides driving their car. Now, it's just not about millennials. It's also about baby boomers. And interesting enough, baby boomers are not your traditional senior citizens. I'm pretty sure most of my baby boomers here would not like to call themselves senior citizens. Yes? Yes. So the new term you should consider your adulthood stage 2. Okay? And this is going to be really interesting because when I was doing my own personal research about Tompkins and this region, while there's a large population of students and young millennials, but there's also a very healthy baby boomer generation. And it really, hopefully, this presentation speaks to you directly because I think you're going to find some interesting nuggets about how you're really feeling, if you're really honest, about why this summit is really important. So let's talk about you for a second, shall we? Now, the old model of senior citizens were, I get old, my eyes get bad, my kids get scared, I get in a car accident, my kids don't want me to drive in the bad traffic, and so I go into a nursing home and I sit there until it's time to go, right? But does today's adulthood stage 2 baby boomers want vibrancy? They're still young at heart and in their bones, and I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty sure many of them can do more push-ups than I can right now because I just can't do that right now. They want this lifestyle. And so the idea that you have them dependent on their, what is natural, aging bodies, but not having them have that active lifestyle is something that they're rejecting in numbers. One of the things I want to highlight here is AARP did a study back in 2010 that showed that for individuals over 45 favored having amenities like the grocery store, the hospital, a bus stop, a park near their homes. In addition to that, we found that, those same individuals, when you actually broke it out about transit, 51% prefer bicycling, like the idea of walking, like the idea of being able to go shopping without getting in their cars. But in addition to that, they even more so than anything did not want to be in communities that were a bunch of senior citizens. They actually wanted to be in communities that were intergenerational, that was mixed age. Yes, the facilities may have baby boomer, adulthood, stage 2 adults amenities, but they wanted to be amongst the young, wanted to be amongst the working families. And to put a finer point on that, employment, since the recession, has become a major theme among baby boomers. Many baby boomers will now be working all the way up to 70, if not longer. And so proximity to their jobs has become yet another big market factor in real estate. And you'll see how this is important in a second. Interesting enough, when we look at the housing stock across America, we have a big problem. So you'll see here, and I hope I do this right, the blue and the red line, sorry, I used the mic. The blue and the red line is the size, the home sizes, okay? And so you'll be using this size. So you see, it's over the years, it's been going up, right? So the blue line is the average, the red is the median. The brown line that you see here, use this side, is the size of households. Starting from 1975, we've been going down. So what does that mean? For the past 67 years, we've been continuing to build bigger and bigger and bigger homes for homes and families that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which means there is a massive pent-up demand for a development that's small for households and are within walkable urban places. And of course, we know DC is expensive. We know that New York City is expensive. We know they have their own gaps. But what you should also know is that one of the places that has the biggest gap in terms of housing stock is in small towns, like Ithaca and Tompkins County. So we know that. Well, if you have pent-up demand, guess what happens? Gentrification. And I think we all know that's probably one of the most hated word in the real estate industry today. But there's two reasons for that in walkable urban places. Generally, construction cost accounts for about 30%, and the other portion is 70% of the cost. Now, I don't know about you, and I'm going to quote my former president, Chris Lineberger, but America has a lot of land. We stole it fair and square. So it's not the issue that we don't have enough land. We just don't have enough walkable urban land. So that's one of the things I want to talk about later on tomorrow, about how do we change that dynamic. But also, I want to take, just a quick time check. How am I doing on time? Good. Well, she says don't stop. I'm going to keep going. Good. I want to take a step back and give you an understanding that this is not just some phenomena that's happening in the big cities. Right? I want to talk about a study that we've done in the top 30 metros. We did in conjunction with George Washington University, with my colleague Chris Lineberger at GW. And we wanted to basically say, what is actually happening in walkable urban places as it compares to drivable suburban places across the country? Now, to give you a clear understanding, we use this 4-cell matrix. So we divide the world into 4 parts: walkable urban and drivable suburban, but within that, regionally significant, which is your typical walk-ups. That's what when I say walk-ups, that's what I mean. Edge cities in the traditional suburban sense. Neighborhoods, which are, your classic residential communities and your classic bedroom communities, suburban. So we took that 4-cell matrix and we said, how are they performing economically and socially? And one of the things we found was, out of 558 walk-ups across this country, DC, New York, Boston, and San Francisco had the highest number of concentrated walkable urban places. Okay? We also found in all the top 30 metros that on average, every walkable urban place, on average, had a 74% rent per square foot premium over their drivable suburban place. Okay? How many of you are familiar with Walk Score? Oh, just a few hands. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. So, take out your phones. I know Martha told you to put your phones away. Take out your phones. And take out your phones. Come on, come on. This is fun. I got 20 minutes. 18 now. All right, here's the deal. I'm going to go through my presentation, but at the end of the presentation, I want you to go to a thing called walkscore.org. It's going to ask you to put in your address. And I want you to look at it, all right? And at the end of my presentation, the person who has the highest score, I will buy a drink for. You like that, right? And right now, the only drink I can offer is a bottle of water. So hold that, look it up, and at the end, I'm going to ask to see who has the highest number. You get to come down and give your story. But here's the thing I want to mention here is that this is not just about the big city. When we look in a lot of these places, it was also about these suburban communities that had this urban, walkable feel as well. And in D.C., naturally you think, D.C. is just a natural big city. Actually, the bulk of the walkable urban places that are popping up are all in the suburban communities. They are actually retrofitting themselves. And interesting enough, while D.C. has a lot of transit access, 25% of its walkable urban places are not transit served. So while transit is a major component to creating walkable urban places, it's not a prerequisite. Interesting enough, and this gets to our conversation today, is that walk-ups, because of their inherent value of creating energy and vibrancy, the economic performance goes up. But because of that, affordability, not just for housing, but commercial space, becomes an issue. So while we're talking today about the housing summit, how we ensure that individuals can stay in their homes, we also should be thinking about how can we ensure that small businesses can stay in neighborhoods, right? We have LifeTech, which is a great federal program to support affordable housing, but we don't have a federal program to support small businesses and affordable commercial space. In D.C., there's a national story that we say 1,000 people move into D.C. every month. But the real story is 4,000 move in, 3,000 move out. Naturally, you'll say, because it costs so darn much. The real story is, yes, it costs a lot, and a lot of people are moving out due to housing costs. But the real story is small business owner, mid-sized business owner who cannot find affordable spaces to expand their businesses. If you care about your vibrancy of your neighborhood, you've got to make sure that you have places for your job creators to grow. So with that, we recognize that you can't actually sit idly by and let the market do it. So you actually have to have a plan. You actually have to have a social equity, affordable housing plan at the beginning of the market. Because otherwise, once the cat is out the bag, it's hard to bring it back in. And that's why this summit is so important. Because you're right now at the cusp of that conversation and you can start putting some things in place to actually mitigate some of the harmful impacts of great walkable urbanism. Now, as I said before, I want to spend the remainder of my 15 minutes, I believe, talking about America's current housing policy, affordable housing policy, which I like to say is failing. Now, you might have heard about this, drive until you qualify, right? That has been America's #1 housing policy for Americans. And actually, I would go on record and probably say that's probably true for this region. If you can't find an affordable place in Ithaca or some of the hot walkable urban places in some of the rural town centers, keep driving. Keep driving until you find something. Now, as I said before, I did my research. And what you see here is a snapshot from the Center on Neighborhood Technology that shows a heat map of the affordability of housing in Tompkins County. The darker the color, the blue, you see here, here, the more expensive the housing. So clearly, cheap housing here, cheap housing here, here. Anyone lives in these areas? Show of hands. Okay, few of you. Now, naturally, we will stop the conversation when it comes to affordability. Just move to one of these great places out here, and you'll find a house and just commute in. And I know a lot of you guys are doing that right now. But that's not where the conversation should end. If you go one step further, and again, remember how I started this conversation? Transportation drives development. If you combine your housing and transportation costs just in Tompkins, the lighter blue means it's really, really expensive. Where's the lighter blue? Interesting enough, the lake, that's funny. Let me tell you, if you can live on the lake and walk on the lake, we have other questions for you. Interesting enough, Tompkins County, by definition, is traditionally a drivable suburban market. Okay? And interesting enough, you have to ask yourself the simple question, what is really affordable? Now, I did not put this on the slide, but I did peep in and said, if you lived here, the average is about 56%. That's the aggregate. If you lived in downtown Ithaca, guess what your number is? 47%. So while you may be spending more money on housing, your net on transportation costs covers the difference. And let me put it in a different way. Household spending. Traditional average is about 30%, 32% on housing. Nationally, America spends 19% on transportation and 48% to spend on how the hell they want it. In driving suburban places, that number goes up, the transportation costs go up to 25, housing stays about the same. But if you live in a walkable urban place, see the difference? This is the story that we don't talk about when we talk about housing affordability. Yes, you may live in a cheap home, an affordable home now. But what is also your transportation costs? Because you will find out very quickly that maybe you're spending a lot more of your household dollars on things that doesn't get you ahead. Instead of you feeling that you're thriving, you're actually just surviving. And that's the conversation tomorrow we have to have about how do we make sure that Tompkins County is a thriving region. Now, a Forbes magazine in 2015, using the housing and transportation index I just showed you, said these were the cities that were the most affordable. Do you know what's common? What these cities have in common? Yell it out. Wait, yell it out. Midwest? Oh, there's some Midwest, and there's some southern towns in there too. One of the things that each of these towns have is that they focused in on creating walkable urban places that had a mixture of transportation options. Interesting enough, places like Knoxville, Buffalo, Oklahoma City, St. Louis, Indianapolis are putting millions into advancing transit, while at the same time doing things like land trusts, creating employer-based housing strategies. They're putting those things now, or they've been putting those things over the past 10 years, so that now when the market has come to their favor in terms of what they're still retaining their affordability. It's things that we should be thinking about implementing here in this region. Now, here's one thing I want to go back to my baby boomers, since a lot of you guys are here, my adulthood stage 2 Americans. One of the things about walkable urbanism, and this piece is so important, is that after the recession, baby boomers have become increasingly income sensitive. Most baby boomers actually have less than $100,000 in their retirement savings. So more than maybe the millennials, they are sensitive to housing cost increases, transportation cost increases. So those of you who are homeowners are, while you're glad that your property values are going through the roof, but you're asking yourself a simple question. How the hell am I going to pay those property taxes, right? So this is the type of conversation we've got to have. It's not just, hey, affordability for everybody, but it's also how do we make sure the strategies are implemented in such a way that we get to the most vulnerable. And sometimes it's not always evident. So I would like to end my presentation with a couple of suggestions. First, addressing affordability, whether it's housing or even commercial space, I have to be honest with you. There's no silver bullet. There's no one answer. There are strategies that would deal with a problem. And what I'd like to afford to you is that, hey, I know I'm from Washington, I'm supposed to be the guy with all that great ideas, and supposed to give you an answer. That's what I'm not here to do. I'm telling you, you got to do a suite of things, a menu of options that address key issues, and you have to make real choices. So with that, I also want to put, as someone who is from rural America, you have an interesting dynamic compared to some of the other regions that I talked about earlier. Because you're a rural small town, you not only have to think about the affordability, but you got to think about, you got something that a lot of other places don't have. Valuable land, farmland, open space, places that I want my kids to go see the beautiful ravine, the mountain ranges, the rivers, and so forth, access. These things you want to protect, because otherwise, if we maintain the current affordable housing policy of this country, these items would no longer be there. But the question is, we know, in a place like Ithaca, there's only so much more you can build, right? We're land change. So the question is, where do you build next? And that's the conversation you've got to have. Where are we going to concentrate our new development? And it doesn't always have to be in the downtown core. Now, here's some typical impediments to achieving affordable housing. And I like to actually use the term attainable housing, because it has to be housing for everybody. I want rich people living in walkable urban places. I want low-income people living in walkable urban places. It needs to be housing that everyone can attain no matter where they are on the income scale. But here are some common issues that we found across the country that have been impediments, and things that you should be thinking about as you craft your strategies to create a more affordable environment and inclusive environment. Now, one of the things I will hone on is zoning and NIMBY opposition. The Economist in 2015 did a study and a research that basically showed local zoning and NIMBY opposition is by far the single reason why we have an affordable housing issue in this country. Because the fact that these communities that we know are desirable can't accommodate and are not allowed to build up, we actually are creating the problem within ourselves. But here's the thing I challenge the Economist on. It's not that there's a NIMBY opposition. That should be the issue that we should focus on. It's the fact that as a community, we don't talk to one another to understand what we all need from one another. When a developer walks into a community and says, I'm going to build this 12-story apartment building, did that developer have a conversation with the community beforehand? Did he or she ask, what does the community need at this juncture? No. Oftentimes, it's a plan that gets presented that the community reacts to. One of the things that at Locust we've been encouraging our developers and the industry to do is create process where you actually democratize the development project, where all of you get to influence and inform and shape the development that you have, but through that, everyone can see the benefit for themselves. And that's how you change not in my backyard to yes in my backyard. And I say that to say is that there are other communities that are doing this. They're finding ways to create, hey, and then normally I was trying to find a very hideous skyscraper to put before this. But normally you hear about density and walk urban. You see these big skyscrapers. But really what we're talking about is people-centric communities. And I think all of you can say you would like to see that in your neighborhood. Yes? Yeah? Yeah. So with that being said, it's communities like that, like rural America that Tompkins represent, that you can have this vibrant, walkable urban place, but it doesn't have to look like downtown D.C. It can have your character, have your influence. But in order to do that, you have to have a plan and you have to have a conversation. Both the city, the developer, and the local community. Not just some members of the community, but everyone, because you're in it together. Because just because it's not happening in your neighborhood, it is coming to your neighborhood. And so what happens across the river, on the other side of the university, you got to know that, and you got to be engaged. And you may have to understand trade-offs. That today we may not get what we want, but we know this is going to help us 10 years from now. But you got to have the conversation. I just use these examples because tomorrow I will be talking about some of these communities and how they're taking some strategies, whether it's employer-based housing, using certain federal programs to create affordable housing, at a scale in my presentation tomorrow. But these are some of the examples to kind of give you the idea that this doesn't have to be tall buildings. We're talking about the missing middle here in a place like Ithaca and Tompkins County. So I'm going to leave you with a couple ideas. We'll talk more about tomorrow, but a couple of things I'll say. Zoning reform. Make the thing that you want easy. Think about ancillary units, granny flats. How do we turn a lot of the single-family homes to duplexes? How do we incentivize? How do we lower the costs? Are we implementing land trusts? What incentives is the city providing current homeowners, i.e. grandfather them in on the property tax increases? These are the conversations you should be thinking about. Long-term, public-private partnerships is critical. And I know there are a couple of you guys who are doing the land trust and others. That's a great strategy to implement. One of the things I cannot emphasize more is ask yourselves, if the housing can't be built, can we figure out ways to reduce the transportation costs for that resident? So if it's a Cornell student, can we put in bike shares where they're now using more biking around their campus where they can afford other places? Improvement districts that take some of the revenues that might be going towards the landlord. You take some of those revenues and actually provide subsidies to the renters. There are different strategies you can do. As I mentioned before, working with employers like Cornell. How are you crafting your employee-assisted housing in the city of Ithaca? Or how are you coordinating your shuttles to get your workers in and out? Because congestion is an issue, yes? Yes. And last but not least, this is not a problem that Tompkins can do on its own or Ithaca can do it on its own. It's a regional and a national issue. And so you, starting a conversation here today, you should be having a conversation with your partners all around this county and literally figuring out how can you create more walkable urban places, because unfortunately, as I showed before, there's a massive pent-up demand for people who want to live in this region. And the question is, how do you accommodate them and what strategy do you have? So with that, thank you for your time. I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you. And with that, I think I have 2 minutes left. Really quickly, your walk score. Who has the highest walk score?
4.
Name it.
91.
Anyone can go higher than 91. Going once. 95. 97. Woo! Anyone higher than 97? Going once, going twice. So to the woman in the back, 97. Thank you. And I'll see you guys later.
Thank you, Christopher. Another hand. That was great. How about another issue? I couldn't get the site on my phone. Maybe broadband's another issue we'll talk about. Ed Marks has served as Tompkins County Planning Commissioner for 15 years, since 2002. We both came into this county government at the same time. He directs the planning department and oversees implementation of the county comprehensive plan, including development of strategic initiatives focused on housing, energy and greenhouse gas emissions, conservation and sustainable development. Ed leads the efforts within the county government to achieve organizational sustainability as well as county programs aimed at community sustainability long term. For a while, Ed was also Commissioner of Public Works from 2005 to 2010, and then Deputy County Administrator from 2003 to 2005. Before coming here to Tompkins County, he was Director of Planning and Community Development for Oswego County for 11 years. And I just want to say, these 15 years been a learning experience every day, a true pleasure to work with Ed and his amazing staff, who I feel like, I'm just always blown away by what they bring to the table and how they anticipate our questions and how they just really get things done. So thank you, Ed, and thanks to all the planning staff in Tompkins County.
Okay, good. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. We've been talking about housing in this county since I got here. Anybody that's moved here in their lifetime becomes an expert on housing instantly. Because, show of hands, who here has not faced a housing challenge in Tompkins County at some point during the residency here? Okay, a few of you. You're the lucky ones. But it's been an issue for many people for a long time, and we've been exploring, solutions for quite some time. So what I want to do tonight is just give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about. Talk a little bit about what we know about the problem, what we've done in the past to try to address it, our most recent needs assessment to update our understanding. Then a couple of other studies have been going on concurrently with the county study, a downtown market study, and Cornell looking at student housing needs at Cornell. And then share with you some preliminary ideas about what we think we might need in the future in terms of housing. So define the problem. First question. Complex issue. Not everybody's housing needs are the same by any means. We have a lot of different components. Families need something different than singles do. Students need something different than seniors. We have people with special housing needs that really struggle in a tight housing market. And then we've got a lot of stakeholders. We've got landlords and developers. We've got local officials and neighbors and neighborhoods. We have people trying to provide public transportation and services to people that need them. And we have employers trying to recruit and retain the employees they need. And housing is a factor for all of these folks. Just a brief review to set the stage a little, just in case anybody doesn't know where we are and what our characteristics are. We're about 105,000 people, almost a third college students. Households pretty evenly divided between what's considered family households, related people living together, and non-family households. Housing units, pretty close. About 54% are in single-family units. About 46% are in multifamily buildings. And similarly, the owner occupancy is about 54%, 46% renter. This is countywide. Varies a lot from municipality to municipality, but that's the big picture. A couple of other things. Income. Household, that's everybody's income average, median, not average, median, middle of the range, 58,000. For families, it's 84,000. For non-families, only 32. So people have different abilities in terms of their capacity to purchase housing that they need. The median value of an owner-occupied home is about $195,000, and the median rent in the county is a little over $1,000. So those are just some benchmarks of sorts. So what's the problem? Well, we have about 38% of people, owners and renters combined, that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Now, people have gotten used to that in many cases, and spending 40%, it's not shocking. As was mentioned by Christopher, it makes a big difference what the whole household cost for transportation and housing is. But generally, when you're spending more than 30%, it means you're shortchanging something else in your household budget. It may be the savings for retirement or for your child to go to college. It may be putting food on the table for your kids, depending on your situation. But it creates impacts that are very severe and very significant for a lot of folks. In terms of some of the stuff we've learned from the recent assessment, occupancy in larger multi-unit buildings is about 58% students. So people that need to rent in this community that are working in the community, not students, are competing with students for housing. That's pretty obvious to a lot of folks. But it can make a big difference in terms of your ability to secure housing and what you can afford to pay. Many students are 3, 4 to a unit with parents paying the tab in some cases, and they can outbid a working family for housing pretty quickly. And so that creates stress on those working family households in terms of finding housing. The median purchase price in Tompkins County, and somehow a couple counties got deleted, but we've got Tioga, Chemung, and Cortland in that mix. Or Cortland's there, Chemung and Schuyler are there too. But as you can see, it's almost double. It's clearly 60 to 80% more to buy a house in Tompkins compared to the adjoining counties. And partly as a result, we've got 25% of our workers commuting in from outside, and that's been increasing over time. So what does that mean? Some folks would say, well, people are living somewhere. What's the big deal? People figure it out and do what they have to do. Well, there's a lot of impacts from the way we provide housing in our community. First and foremost is social equity. Who suffers the most? It's the folks at the lower paying jobs who can't afford to live near them, have to commute a long distance, then they incur the transportation costs, as Christopher was talking about. They struggle to use public transportation because even housing in proximity to bus routes is hard for them to secure. And oftentimes they have to move because housing costs go up and they can't maintain it. That has an impact on their kids when they have to change schools. The stability of a household can be impacted by their housing instability. Also, having 25% of the people that work here commute in means we don't have the advantage of everything they could bring to this community. They're not spending a lot of their money locally, they're not volunteering locally, they're not donating to local organizations probably. And so all their talents outside of work are going someplace else. And their connection to the community isn't what it could be. From an economic development perspective, already mentioned, it's difficult to recruit people. We hear stories over and over again of someone who's been hired or offered a job. They're enthusiastic to come to Tompkins County, Ithaca, a great place. They look at the housing situation and they say, sorry, can't come there. That's tough on growing our economy. We also have an opportunity. We need more housing. If we could build it, think of the jobs, construction jobs and the other jobs to finish those housing units. We're missing out on that too. Gentrification, displacement, people's traditional neighborhoods, sometimes they can't afford to stay there anymore. They lose the connections, family and social connections that are important to them. Housing quality, when you've got a very tight housing market, reinvesting in units, why bother if you can rent it the way it is? And so housing quality can decline. Traffic and transportation impacts, I'm sure most of us that drive at all have experienced the traffic impacts. It's increasing, and our TCAT, public transportation system, is struggling to offer transportation that people would like to have, and that costs more money. And then finally, the more people are driving from farther and farther away, the more energy is being used, the more greenhouse gases are being emitted, and that undermines our efforts to reduce that. So what have we done to date? When I first came here in 2002, the first thing we did was undertake development of our first county comprehensive plan, completed in 2014. Top issue, one of the very top issues, was housing. The first thing we did was undertake a housing needs assessment in 2006, which was completed in 2006. Started in 2005, completed in 2006. At that point, we were looking not at students, not at income commuters, just trying to figure out what the workforce population housing needs were, and did a projection out 10 years, not with a spreadsheet or anything we could work with in the future, and it really wasn't something we could update. But we did the study, and it estimated we need about 4,000 non-student units by 2014, and the majority of those needed to be for people 80% and below median income. Well, the recession hit, so that 4,000 number might not have been what is realistic after the recession, but we didn't make the total units, but we really didn't make the affordable units. And that's the challenge. The housing that we're building isn't affordable to the people that need it the most, for the most part. Now, there have been exceptions, and great work by INHS and others to build a lot of great housing that's affordable, but we haven't been able to build enough yet. In 2007, we adopted a strategy based on the needs assessment in 2006, and there were 4 major recommendations. One was develop a housing trust. The idea there is to, if you're putting public money into housing, and then it turns over, somebody buys a house with public assistance, it turns over 5 or 10 years and goes back at a market rate, you've lost that public investment. For the next person, it's not affordable to them. Housing trust keeps ownership of the land under the house, and by that ownership keeps the unit permanently affordable. INHS developed a program, have put 52 units in it so far that are permanently going to be available to affordable people, either the people living there now or in the future. Provide more local funding to support affordable housing. We developed, in cooperation with Cornell and the City of Ithaca, the Community Housing Development Fund, which has $400,000 a year that's available to support affordable housing projects in this community. 294 units to date have been supported with that fund, and it's been re-upped for another 6-year term. We agreed initially for 6 years, and now it's been re-upped for another 6 years. 294 units. Significant, but not enough. Inclusionary incentive zoning. This is the idea of either requiring or providing incentives so that a certain percentage of new units built will be affordable at some level. 1 or 2 places have put it in their zoning ordinances. A couple places, several communities have mentioned it in the comprehensive plans. Hasn't been any project done yet to date that's used or taken advantage of that. Employer-assisted housing. Christopher mentioned that. Back when we did the strategy in 2007, we had looked at our major employer. Where do you start? You start with the big one, Cornell. They were interested in trying to work with some kind of a program to assist employees with their housing needs. The recession hit, endowment decline in value, stress financially at Cornell. We all know that story. They weren't able to move on that. Something we may need to revisit. So the period of that first assessment passed. We know we need to revisit it. We updated our comprehensive plan in 2015. Time to take another look. And this past year, we've been looking again at what the needs look like today. And so this time, we did it a little bit differently. We realized the student market affects the rest of the market so much you can't do it. You can't look at housing in isolation and not talk about student housing. So we're including it. We're using a model that can be adjusted as we go forward based on employment, student enrollment. We can plug in new numbers if things change and get new estimates of where we need to go. So this is something we can work with year to year and update. And we also recognize we need to look at in-commuters. This is a big issue for our future. And we also took a look at senior and special housing needs as important components of our housing market. Elements of the assessment, we hired Danter Associates. They did field surveys of existing rental housing, analyzed the existing market based on data available, did a lot of interviews with professionals in the area, reviewed employment and student enrollment trends, did a survey of special needs organizations that provide housing for special needs populations, and then we did an internet survey of 4,500 people, which was a really great response, including residents, students, and in-commuters. Some of the findings, the market rate inventory for apartments looked at 100%. They did an inventory of 100% of those larger properties over 24 units and a sample of about 22% of the units in smaller properties under 24 units. Found the vacancy rates of about 1.8% for the large properties, 6.5% for the smaller, and overall average of 4.5% vacancy. You can see the average rents there. A little higher for the most part in the larger properties that are maybe a little more modern and recent in construction. Some other interesting points that come out of this. It's kind of a break point at $50,000 in income. 70% of renter households earn less than $50,000. 70% of people who own their homes earn more. So you kind of get an idea where the market is there. The unmet demand, current unmet demand for rental housing, they estimated what today you could add to the marketplace if you If it were available, 92% of that unmet demand, though, would be for, if it was going to be at 30% income, would be for rents of $800 or below. Not much new housing is being built at that rate. High demand for ownership housing below $250,000. Over 50% of the single family and condominium demand is in that range. And 64% of the single family housing sales remain in that range, although that's a declining number over time. Used to be higher. So what's going to be driving our need for housing over the next 10 years? Employment growth. We're projecting 1% per year. That's been pretty much the trend with a little dip in the recession, but the long-term trend has been about 1% per year, and so that's what we're using for our estimates. Student enrollment increases. We're looking at a trend line again of about a 1% a year. That's a little less certain. The institutions, the college and university, who knows? We know Cornell would like to increase some of its enrollment. Hard to say for sure where that's going. Senior population, adult stage 2 population, projected to grow 44% in 10 years. I'm one of those folks that's going to go there. So that's huge. And those needs are not necessarily being met today. And the preference for walkable communities and access to transportation options, particularly among people living in the county, that's very clear that that's what people are looking for when they're looking for housing. So some of the other analysis, over the last 10 years, we looked at single-family housing starts, about 165 on average over that period, based on a couple different ways of analyzing what they think the demand would be or the sustainable rate of development. They came up with about 220 units, so we got a deficiency every year of, 50-some units, 60 units. And if we could build housing for under 200,000, there'd be another 85 units that would be demanded for single-family housing. The internet survey I mentioned, particularly looking at the in-commuters, there's a lot of good data on this on our website. Go look at it. You can learn a lot of interesting things about what people think about their housing. But looking at in-commuters and reading what people said about wanting to live in Tompkins County, planning to move in the next near future, maybe moving to Tompkins County, you put that all together, about 1,500 in-commuters could potentially be looking to move into Tompkins County in the next 5 to 10 years. Most of them would prefer single-family homes. They live in them now. Most of them prefer to own. Most of them own now. The location preference might not be that surprising given that they're living outside the county, probably in rural areas now for a large part. But villages, suburban areas, and even a percentage in the city, there's a lot of opportunities of ways that demand could be met. There's also potential for more student housing. I guess we're seeing it happen before our eyes in College Town right now. But they estimated about 1,500 new student beds could be put into the market in the next 5 years, based on what would be expected in a student population of this size. Special needs housing. This is important. We didn't really delve into it as much last time, although it's been recognized under both of our comprehensive plans. But there's a lot of folks that have extra challenges. Women with children who may be fleeing an abusive situation, don't feel great going into a shelter, not a place you want to go with your kids. Supportive housing for individuals who can't function totally on their own. We have some of these facilities. There's waiting lists and demand for more. Halfway houses for people re-entering from incarceration, recovering from addiction. They need a place where they can be safe, secure, and not be tempted to go back to their prior ways. Group homes for young people, the closest one here is in Elmira. If a youth needs to go into a group home, they're going to be taken out of their community. Supportive apartments for youth. One of the most under-thought about groups in our community, I think, is those people 18 to 22, 24 who aren't going to college. And they feel that way. They feel like the unseen, unthought of population. And they're struggling to get on their feet, real tough to find housing. It's a real problem. And although not really a special needs, people moving from these situations can't find housing with good access to transportation where they can get to a job. All these people are looking to stabilize themselves, get a job. If you can't find housing that you can actually get to work on time, you can't afford maybe a car, your car breaks down, you can't use public transit because it's 5 miles away to get to a transit route. That's the kind of situation a lot of folks are facing. Senior housing, as I mentioned, that's going to be one of the biggest growing demands in our community. And what we've heard from the people that are working with the senior community, adult stage 2, I'll have to learn that one, is that there aren't real options. A lot of people would like to downsize. There aren't really good options. We have folks that need assisted living that are on Medicaid. No facility in Tompkins County for them. And just generally having housing units that are designed to allow people to age in place, very hard to find in the community right now. So just a couple other quickly efforts going on concurrently with our needs assessment. Downtown Ithaca Alliance hired Danter Associates also to look at the downtown market, and particularly looking at rental housing. They estimated that the potential absorption of 200 units per year, 60% of those would need to be in the $800 to $1,300 per month rental range. So some of what we've been seeing developed recently hasn't been in that range. This is based on what could be estimated could be captured in downtown as a desirable place to live if it could be built. So that's not to say that's the only place it might happen, but it could be captured there in the consultant's estimation. So this is more of a market study from a development point of view. Also, Cornell's been looking at its housing needs on campus in particular. And we'll hear more from Ryan Lombardi tomorrow about that. But just to summarize real quick, the Maplewood project, redeveloping the existing senior housing area to add like 500 units to the mix there. That's focused on graduate students, and that'll help a lot with what they see as graduate student housing needs. Now they're going to be looking to shift their attention to undergrads. They have a need to renovate and do deferred maintenance on a lot of the older on-campus dorms. So they need to build some new housing on campus to shift those students into while that work is happening. But they also see a need to add some additional dorm space on campus to serve the needs of those students, particularly the freshmen and sophomores who want to stay on campus, and sometimes they don't really have the place for them. So that is going to be something they're looking at very hard, and Ryan will talk more about it tomorrow. Also, in addition to meeting the current needs, if there's going to be any enrollment growth, they recognize the need to have housing to accommodate enrollment growth. So there's several components to that. We may hear some numbers about what those might be tomorrow. Finally, what do we think, based on all this, we're going to need in the next 10 years? Well, this is preliminary. We're still in discussion, still need to hear feedback from folks, and this is going to be ongoing discussion for a little while. But the model would suggest, at this point, that we need, on an annual basis, 200 rental housing units, countywide. A lot of them would want to be in the urban area. 300 ownership housing units, and single-family homes, and 80 condominiums. That's if we could build them at the price that people can afford. That's a challenge. Senior population, in addition to people just looking to downsize, those people that are looking for assisted living, independent living with some services, nursing care, whatever, we're going to need 50 to 100 beds a year projected over the next 10 years to keep up with those needs. Student housing, based on that assessment, it could be 150 beds to 300 plus, depending on whether enrollment grows at that 1% we're talking about. And then those special need housings for a lot of populations that really deserve our concern in the community. So what it looks like is kind of half in kind of single family attached or detached units, about half in what would be multifamily probably kind of buildings. So that means it's not going to all likely happen in one place. And it's not going to be all one kind of housing. We're going to have to see housing developed in various parts of the community, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow. So there's a lot more information on our county website about the assessment, a lot of reports that were done where you can see more detailed data. And we also, on the housingtompkins.com website about the Housing Summit, you'll be able to see next steps and how you can stay involved. And with that, thank you for coming. Those that are coming tomorrow, we'll look forward to seeing you. It is being live streamed tomorrow, so if you didn't get in, you can still watch it. It'll be recorded, and you'll be able to watch it later. So please keep informed and in touch and involved on the housing issues. Thank you.
Very much, Ed. Boy, there's a ton of events, and this is just scratching the surface on the data. If you're a data geek, go to the county's planning planning department website, and there's a ton of stuff there. So this is the time we get to hear from you. Do we have any questions? Just come on up to the microphone. I'm sure you got something to say, something to ask. Nah, this is impossible, right? We're Ithaca. Listen, I want to just talk, I'll ask Christopher, but you've seen other communities deal with these kinds of issues around the country. So very quickly, kind of give us an idea of how some communities, what kind of structures communities have created to come together. Is it the county planning department? Is it the economic development? Is it just the city? How does a community pull together? What kind of a structure to make decisions and move forward?
Great question. The easy answer is there are tons of options you can take. Some communities, the city council takes the leadership role. Oftentimes, it could be around the idea that, yes, the most important issue is to create more revenue for affordable housing, ideally targeting certain populations. So the city council may institute a housing fund of some sort and designate the housing authority, another organization, to be responsible for divvying out those resources. Actually, in many cases, and I'll talk more about this tomorrow, we're seeing a lot of neighborhoods within those walkable urban places self-organize and create a conversation amongst themselves of saying, I, a homeowner, I, a renter, I, a business person, what do we want our neighborhood to look like? And they've created their own plan and then worked with the development community to make sure that they were able to meet the metrics. So depending, and the question is, you have to have a public, private, and civic leadership. I know sometimes we talk about P3s, right? The partnership is never really a third part of it. They really talk about the civic engagement, so the public engagement is important. So I'll give that a little bit more tomorrow, so that hopefully gives us a snapshot. Thanks.
Thanks, Christopher. And if it's frustrating that we're talking about tomorrow and you weren't able to get in, look, we tried. We have right now a 65-person waiting list. So, if there's anybody here who knows they're not going to be able to make it after all tomorrow, where's Janet Catraccia? Janet's in the middle. She's handling our registration, which has been an amazing job. Talk to Janet if you know you're registered for tomorrow, but you can't make it. Somebody else will be able to come in. So, T.M., did I see you come on up? Okay.
I have a question. And this has to do, this is a little scary.
Hold it up closer.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. I have a question about tax credits, and maybe you could answer. I'm on the Ithaca Town Board. We have, over the past couple of years, approved some affordable housing complexes, and the developers have been utilizing tax credits. I have questions about the program. The developers come to us and indicate that they are not fiscally able to take advantage of the tax credits and build mixed-use communities. And I'm also concerned that once the investors or the tax credit recipients get their 15 years of tax credits, the communities can become market value. So I just wonder if you have any inside information on whether or not we can make some demands relative to deed restrictions to keep things affordable, and also how we might encourage a developer to make a project mixed use.
And I think you really want to say not just mixed use, but mixed income.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right, so I'm going to tackle it in three parts. First and foremost, you mentioned the tax credit program. Generally speaking, you may know I've met some developers today who have been using the federal affordable housing tax credit, also known as LIHTC, the low-income housing tax credit. It's a popular credit to help reduce affordable housing, primarily for those who are 60% AMI and lower. And oftentimes, the challenge of that program, and how many of you are actually developers? Just raise, okay. So some of you understand this. The challenge of the credit is, one, it's unpredictable. There's only so many sets of allocations giving out a year, and so you have to wait. And so if anyone who's in development or runs a business, you recognize that time can be your enemy, right? Also, the way the LIHTC program is structured, those who are the investor in the project, who's retaining the equity, are within the ownership stack. So if you are trying to bring other debt, whether it's from a bank or other equity, it's very hard to do that without having a real conversation with that equity, the investor partner of the LIHTC credit. And so oftentimes you find LIHTC program projects just being a truly affordable housing project. And oftentimes, I've made this, the issue you have, in addition to that, is if you want it to be mixed income and mixed use, you put the onus on the developer and his retailer and others to figure out a financial and legal structure to make that happen. And oftentimes what happens, if you wanted to do a mixed use, you have to condominize the actual apartment away from the actual retail or commercial space. That's more time, that's more complexity, for those of my developers, that means more lawyers, that means more accountants. It's brain drain. And especially, I said this during dinner, if you are a drivable suburban developer, you have the skill set, and I apologize if you're that developer, of a NASCAR driver. All you have to do is go 150 miles an hour and go left. If you want to build in walkable urban development that's mixed use, mixed income, that has great storm water and so forth, and have, deal with the soil issues, right? That's a level of skill set that's literally taking that NASCAR driver and asking him to fly a fighter jet going 600 miles an hour, left, right, up, down, while being shot at. Why I bring that up is it's important for the county and those who are in public leadership to understand the difficulty of doing the project that you're asking. And so you ask, what are some of the strategies you want to do? Well, one of the things I would say, there are a lot of communities that you should be targeting now that have great land value, i.e. cheap, where it takes not much for a land trust or land banking for the county or through some other agencies to take that, because that is something, as you saw on my slide, oftentimes the biggest hurdle is the land. Second, figure out ways, whether it's through infrastructure incentives, to help the developer reduce construction costs. And lastly, every developer will tell you there's nothing like someone coming to the table with $1, especially if they're patient. And oftentimes you have a situation where, unfortunately, conventional financing doesn't allow you to do mixed income and mixed age development. But if a city, through its economic development arm, actually has that as part of its agenda to provide that patient capital to developers, you will then attract those type of projects. And the last thing I would say, are most of your projects that you put out, are they RFPs or RFQs? Sure. One of the questions I would say is maybe you should be thinking about how you actually structure a development process. Because you don't want every type of developer. You want a developer who actually has a proven record of doing mixed income, mixed use development. I think someone said it best. We don't ask someone what you're going to do for me and they tell you, you marry them. You actually look at their qualifications, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
I saw Larry Roberts. Okay.
So I'm Larry Roberts from the Finger Lakes Independence Center. We're the disability advocacy agency in Tompkins County. And I was wondering if you could talk about what's known, because there seems to be a lot known for adult to baby boomer people, of which actually I'm part of that too. But there seems to be a lot known about the housing preferences for older people. What do we know about the housing preferences for people with disabilities?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, because you're only limited so much time, you can't throw the kitchen sink at a presentation. One of the things that my colleague brought up before is this idea of universal design. And increasingly, we are finding that that is becoming kind of a catch-all of no matter if you are a young family or someone who's 75 years old, universal design actually supports both of those types. And so, interesting enough, that is something that we're seeing across the country, particularly through a lot of our studies, beginning more demand. But again, as I have pointed out in my earlier comments, universal design means more different skill set, higher construction costs, but over a long term, the developer is most likely to get that project sold no matter who's the tenant or the owner. Another key thing is it's not only about what's inside the house. That's important, as my gentleman mentioned about those with disability, but it's also the community upon which that person could live in. So if you're walking down the street, you don't have curb cuts. The ability that someone can actually not only, take a walker and get up the sidewalk, but think about a mother with a stroller. Having universal design not only in a home but within the community is also important. So when I have these conversations, we're increasingly finding that we have to make sure the neighborhoods are accessible, not just for the able-bodied, but also those with disability. And I think if you do that, you'll find that it's not just the person who's disabled who needs that great sidewalk, but everyone else will like to have those amenities as well. Thanks.
Joel, just a second. I think Cynthia Brock, you came up. You're next, Joel, okay? All right, Cynthia Brock.
Thank you. I was intrigued by your comment about how to provide property tax relief for property owners who are being priced out of their homes as property values rise. My understanding is that those types of tax refunds or rebates, not getting the right word, is actually set by the state. And we as a municipality are unable to put in those types of protections for our homeowners. So what suggestions do you have, or what models have you seen that have worked to try to keep our families in our community and not be priced out over the long term?
Well, for one, anyone here at the state legislature present or staff? Well, the first thing I would suggest is getting them in this room to hear this. A lot of states are putting these in place where municipalities can actually, if they want to, explore these options. Another thing is just that there are tons of scenarios where on the assessor, where the city council actually does have the power. Now, does Tompkins County have the ability to do property taxes on themselves? Yeah. Yes. So in their own assessment, you can actually grandfather people in. Oftentimes this happens for individuals who are much, much older. When they hit 70 or 75 or become really elderly, you actually then give them a grandfather where you're capped. And then the city takes the hit. When you sell, sometimes when you sell, they basically get those revenues back. There are strategies you can do. That's one example. But one thing I will also point out, those of you who are homeowners, how many of you currently have renters in your homes right now? Just by show of hands. Okay? One of the things, oftentimes we have this conversation about affordability. Of course, the homeowner is the issue in terms of property tax. But one of the things that a homeowner, if you saw this slide, you might actually got a little tingle in your pocket. That basically says, over the next 10 years, in this region, a house that's located within the walkable urban place, you might be able to charge more. So the question I put back on this conversation at the Housing Summit, what incentives can I give to the homeowner who has the renter, maybe a student, maybe a worker at the hospital, someone who works at Cornell? How do I incentivize you not to increase your rent? And there are ways you can do that. And so that's the conversation that you have to have, because it can't be one side. It's all. And it has to be inclusive. And so those are just some of the things. If we have this conversation about how to protect the homeowner, you also got to realize that in a community like this where renters are using the current housing stock, how do you ensure that your natural incentive, right, is not only respected, but also is put in a position where you can make a good choice, which is keeping that renter over a longer period of time. Okay?
Joel Harlan.
My name's Joel Harlan. Everybody knows what I'm into. I've been to all of you for development, and it's coming true. We do need to expand. A lot of places we need to do is grow heights, not sprawled out in buildings.
Joel, you have a question.
Yeah. Why don't we start building at least the heights, 15-story dormitories for Cornell and IC? You're spreading little stuff out, but you're not going up to meet the needs. And we are working on College Town to bring in more safer buildings, because it's a fire hazard with these students partying in the buildings, and it's overfilled beyond capacity. They live from the basement up to the ceiling.
So your question is, why don't we build tall buildings?
Why don't we get safer, taller building?
Okay, let him answer that.
You know.
I think that's something where, thanks, Joel, as Ed especially was talking about, we have a real high demand for student housing. Vice President Lombardi will talk tomorrow about the survey that Cornell did of its students, and found that their preference was to live in more modern high-rise buildings. And so we're starting to see those projects really come to fruition or get started. They're in the pipeline along College Avenue, for example. So they're interested in that kind of support, that kind of housing. It's also, I think, the first time we've seen Cornell really take a deep dive into this and if I can just say, really take responsibility for the students who are already here. And I believe we'll start hearing more of a commitment that before we see new enrollment growth, that we'll really see development of new housing. And it's actually been a long-term policy of local government here. And actually, going back to Ezra Cornell, who wanted the students to be part of the community, which is a laudable goal. There was always, for a long time, the policy of the city in particular was that housing for students should primarily be off campus so that they're supporting property taxes. Dorms on campus don't pay property taxes. So there's a balance there. There's a trade-off. So our pitch to Cornell in the last few years is that the balance is out of whack, is that we need more of the students to be accommodated on campus. They have a preference to be there, and we're going to start seeing more of that happen. And I just again want to say, if anybody's not going to be able to come tomorrow, please live stream it, or you'll be able to see it anytime later on the Facebook page as well. Anna.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. One thing that I'm curious if you've seen this and what your experience has been in other communities. One of the things that we do here to stimulate growth in the city are abatements or tax breaks, and the requirements are that I think it needs to be 3 floors, livable space, and there's I think it's $500,000 value, and in the downtown core. And one of the things that I've been hearing from smaller developers, a bunch of smaller developers, is that they would love to be a part of that it would help encourage that sort of medium-level development that might be the condos, or have you seen any expansion of tax abatements that has encouraged the smaller developers? So that was just a question, if you've seen that, if you encourage it, and your feedback.
So let me answer this in a way that really captures my true feeling. The challenge that we have today in meeting affordability in housing is the fact that we have a missing middle. We have, as Joel pointed out, yes, there's a lot of interest to go high. And there's clear interest to maintain single-family housing. But there is this space between small-scale development that actually, and one of the things I wanted to say to Joel is that one of the natural reactions someone would have to a suggestion like that is you don't want to lose the natural character of the region. And this is where the missing middle is so important. Because that's the piece that connects the tissue of your traditional single-family, small duplex to your high-rise. And that's where you get your character. And so, yes, missing middle, whether it's 5 to 10 units, are very important. There are a lot of cities that are using all sorts of tax incentives to encourage that. One way on the regulatory side is basically give at right. If you literally have form-based codes, if you meet these requirements, you can build. One of the challenges, and one of the slides I did not include, as you saw, there are some federal requirements, federal impediments to this missing middle. And one of those, and I'll give you an example. Imagine if you're trying to build or retrofit a 2 or 3 story building, and the rents are not there. What you really want to do is kind of expand the commercial space to compensate for the loss you're going to get in the rents. However, there are HUD programs like the 220D program that's supposed to incentivize small-scale development, but they have a limitation on how much commercial space you can have in the building. Now, naturally, if you care about affordability, right, you want to make sure that that commercial space can help take some of the costs out. But unfortunately, if a developer wants to get financing, right, he has to follow the rules. And so that's the place that a lot of cities are trying to fit in that rubric, where the federal government won't support. And interesting enough, we've been working with CNU and a number of other organizations to change that specific modification to actually move it from, which was traditionally 15%, and is now about 25%. But we've given the authority to the HUD regional administrator to actually go even higher for those jurisdictions if it's in walkable urban places. So yes, tax abatement is one strategy. HUD administrators now have the ability to use their financing programs to incentivize that. And to Joel's point, you have to have the missing middle to piece together the community, because otherwise some of these individuals will be totally opposed to having new sky rises popping up around Ithaca or in the county. Exactly. So,
all right, are there any more questions? Is that Joel? Oh, come on to the mic. And let me just say again, if anybody, as more people leave, if you're not already registered, please put your name and contact information on one of the comment cards and hand that in. And we'll stay in touch. Yeah. Go ahead.
Seth Adams, a small developer. Speaking of the missing middle, I'm a member of that. I'm a member of the small missing middle. A small developer here in Ithaca, Corning, as well as Elmira. And with respect to Anna's question, we both serve on the Downtown Ithaca Alliance Board. And one thing that I discovered here in the past year as a small developer in pushing efforts for tax abatement programs in these communities, I led an effort, or was part of an effort in Elmira, to push a New York real property law, 444A. Some may be familiar with that program. I called the local tax assessor here in Tompkins County. He seemed relatively unaware that abatement was being utilized. I was very surprised, considering the number of historic buildings, rehabilitation projects that are for individual homeowners as well as people who do old historic buildings, such as myself. So there are programs available, I think, that also may be just underutilized within the county that maybe we might need to look at.
Perfect.
Jay, is that you up there? Jay, one comment? Let's put Jay on the spot. Jay Franklin, our county assessor. I told you we might need you here. So this will be the last thing, and I think if you could also talk about the other question about exemptions, or like capping property taxes for a senior citizen or adult stage 2.
Well, there's over 250 exemptions that New York State offers. There's a lot of unique ones that are out there. The historic property exemption is offered by the county and the city for properties within the historic district. I think there's 3 properties right now that receive that benefit. So there is some, but with the big tax being the school tax, it's really not all that beneficial. We could, you can't cap any taxes. The real property tax is an ad valorem tax. It's based upon value. In order to be fair and equitable, everything is taxable at its value unless there's an exemption. There has been talk about doing a circuit breaker at the state level over the last few years, but that hasn't gone through because it's not fair and equitable. You know, the same argument you can make for a senior citizen, you can make for the first-time home buyers with children, and do they have that same capacity to spend the money on their housing as the senior citizen who no longer has that mortgage payment? So it's something we could pursue with the state, and if the law allows it, then my office is more than happy to administer it.
Thanks, Jay. And I think with that, I think we'll close. I really appreciate everybody being here, appreciate your questions. And I would just underscore what Christopher said about that there are a lot of different things that, you know, may not think that that initiative or that idea is going to make such a huge difference. But if we put a lot of different things together, I think we really can, those can add up to creating a more equitable, sustainable community for all of us. So thanks so much for coming. Hope to see a lot of you tomorrow.